This lecture will be structured in three main parts, but I'm going to encourage you to raise your hand, to interact. We will have time for questions at the end, but I think in the spirit of AE, it would be nice to have a conversation going if you feel so inspired. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here to celebrate the spiritual genius of A.E. George Russell. As we gather together in the United Arts Club in Dublin on this fifth day in July in the year 2025, the stars are in alignment. The United Nations General Assembly declared by resolution that 2025 is the International Year of Cooperatives. And today, Saturday, 5 July, is an International Day of Cooperatives. As the International A.E. George Russell Society continues our year-long celebration of A.E. 90 and the spiritual genius of A.E., this is the opportune time to feature an important friendship between two spiritual brothers. One Irish, A.E. George William Russell, 1867 to 1935, and the other American, Henry A. Wallace, 1888 to 1965. The purpose of my talk is to shed light on these kindred spirits who journeyed from farm fields to the White House in their shared quest for cooperative civilizations. Both worked hard to educate and to illuminate. Both influenced their generation and future generations. Both believed that cooperation provided the key for making the world a better place. Those of you in this room know and admire A.E. He was a myriad-minded man. Three golden and interwoven threads appear when studying the rich tapestry of his life: theosophy, the cooperative movement, beauty. And connected to that, of course, is nature and art. So I think you see here, this is our three-part structure. The same golden threads appear when studying the life and legacy of Henry A. Wallace. So part one. 90 years ago, in July 1935, A.E. sent the following goodbye letter to Henry A. Wallace. He was too ill to write it, so he dictated it to Miss Pamela Travers. The letter consists of 3 paragraphs. I'm going to read the letter. My dear Henry, this is to say goodbye to you. My doctors here have diagnosed my trouble as one that cannot be cured either by medical or surgical means. I have had rather a severe operation, and as I do not know how long I have to remain here, possibly less than 6 months, will you convey to my good friends M.L. Wilson and John Collier how much I appreciate their kindness to me when I was in Washington? To you, dear Henry. As to myself, death does not make much matter. There is an eternal pilgrimage and a return, and we understand each other. I hope for you a great career in your country and give my kind regards to your wife. And Collier and Wilson will understand I was not trying to escape from any work I could do. It was really that I felt incapable. Well, as you can see, it is difficult to read this letter. I knew it would be. It is intimate and deeply heartfelt. Within days after dictating this, A.E. would shuffle off his mortal coil. It is also difficult to read this goodbye letter unless one has access to the Henry A. Wallace archives at the University of Iowa in America, and that is not easily accessible. But thanks to librarians both in Wisconsin and in Iowa, I was able to receive numerous reels of microfilm from the Henry A. Wallace archive. What a joy that was. I was back to graduate school when I had no digital word search, key search. I just had to go slide by slide. And I actually had to watch a YouTube video on how to get it in the reel. Anyway, get it to work. What surprised me, and there were many surprises on this journey, is that the goodbye letter I was seeing on microfilm is not the same goodbye letter that Alan Denson publishes in the Letters of A.E. And that's the publication from 1961. It does, however, match the one that Professor Summerfield quotes from in his biography, That Myriad-Minded Man. And it also matches, this is quite a rare publication. This is where I found that, though there is an interesting typo. It says Godbye instead of goodbye. The original letter says goodbye. Okay. So the letter presented by Denson. So if you go home tonight and get out go to your AE bookshelf, I know many of you have that. Pull this out and look at it. Denson's letter is one paragraph, not three. Here are some of the differences. The letter that Denson publishes doesn't mention time. So I find that very interesting. Here he's thinking maybe he has 6 months, but of course he doesn't. He has days, if that. But for me, the most striking change is that the Denson letter leaves out the reference to reincarnation. So I will just quote to you, dear Henry, as to myself, death does not matter, make much matter. This is the Denson letter, period. We understand each other, period. I hope for you a great career in your country. Well, as an English teacher, I'm on this. Because of that, getting rid of that phrase, there is an eternal pilgrimage and a return, is a significant difference. So for all of us, we are all involved in AE studies. A reminder of the importance of primary sources. Okay, if you would. Now, I took this photo of the grave last summer in July. We know that it's been cleaned up, but it actually kind of works nicely with the color palette of Eli Place. The reference to an eternal pilgrimage and a return appears in other places in AE's life. For example, the Theosophical Household, the mural created by AE, depicts a journey of the pilgrim soul. And then another example is the headstone, where he's quoting from Homeward Songs by the Way and talking about that eternal pilgrimage and knowing that he will return, or that we all will, if you believe in reincarnation. So who was dear Henry? Oh, I guess I better not leave this. He was a theosophist. And last year when I talked about Althea Giles, I presented the Irish theosophist and had people think about what it stood for. That idea of welcoming everyone, not making distinctions based on the color of your skin or where you came from, and so on. The idea of studying, going beyond where you are, looking to other the Far East, looking within. And then, of course, the last one that we certainly were reminded of that last night, the divine wisdom, that spark that we all have and we just need to rediscover. And it's more than a spark. I know, Michael, in your book of poetry, you have this painting by A.E. of Madame Blavatsky. I'm just curious, when you look at this painting, anybody, what do you see?
An Aztec figure?
Yes, the first time I saw it, and this was last summer when I was here in the National Library at the Yates exhibit. So that's right. Sorry, it's a little crooked, but that was the best photo I could find. I was a little surprised. That's Blavatsky? So you think Aztec? I saw today's news in France, they've unveiled this big mural in Lady Liberties like this. How appropriate. But this kind of has that Lady Liberty. But, oh, I want to hang out with her. Kind of Southwestern, the turquoise, indigenous. Okay. So part 2, the Wallaces. Who was dear Henry? To quote A.E., we understand each other. Well, posterity has not been kind to Henry A. Wallace. If remembered at all, he is remembered vaguely. And before I go too far, I will explain this circle. These are all Henry Wallaces. I'll come back to them. But this is our man right here, looking at his sweet little baby son. Okay, so that's Henry Wallace. If remembered at all, he's remembered vaguely. As a Secretary of Agriculture in the United States from 1933 to 1940, Vice President of the United States from 1941 to 45, or the Theosophist president who never was. Fogs of rumor have surrounded him and continue to surround him. There is a murky mixture of labels. For starters, suspected communist and confirmed mystic. There are mysterious letters, the guru letters. And due to our time constraint, I will not address these today, but do know that I spent some money and I ordered them. So we can talk. There are also missing letters. And this is important in terms of AE scholarship. Some very important letters have gone missing. I haven't tracked them down yet, so we all need to get our Sherlock Holmes hat on. In particular, there's a collection of letters between AE and Henry Wallace. They were collected by Mr. James A. Healy, and they were donated to Colby College in Maine. However, there was a disagreement, and Mr. Healy pulled these letters between AE and Henry Wallace. Professor Henry Summerfield, when interviewed, said that he had seen a few of these letters, but that was over 50 years ago. And one topic of discussion was theosophy. Recently, Professor Summerfield alerted the AE George Russell Society that these important letters between AE and Henry Wallace are missing and deserve to be found. A voice crying out in the wilderness. Henry A. Wallace spoke clearly and eloquently about American fascism. In 1944, just a few months before he would be rejected by his own party for renomination for a second term as vice president, Wallace published an essay in the New York Times entitled "The Danger of American Fascism." Wallace asserted, "A fascist is one whose lust for money or power is combined with such an intensity of intolerance towards those of other races, parties, classes, religions, cultures, or nations as to make him ruthless in his use of deceit or violence to attain his ends." Now, as you hear that quote, of course, we're thinking about today, but we're also thinking about that issue, that early issue of the Irish Theosophists, talking about what they stand for. There are no distinctions. We are all welcome. He warned against the danger of American fascists who deliberately, and this is a quote, deliberately pervert truth and fact and carefully cultivate every fissure of disunity. Wow, as I was writing this, I just kept looking up going, oh man. Here's another quote. They demand free enterprise, but are the spokesmen for monopoly and vested interest. Another quote. Their final objective towards which all their deceit is directed is to capture political power so that using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously, they may keep the common man in eternal subjection. He concludes his article on American fascism with an alternative: the way of the cooperation, the cooperative movement. And here's his quote. But if we put our trust in the common sense of common men, and with malice towards none and charity for all, go forward on the great adventure of making political, economic, and social democracy a practical reality, we shall not fail. So Henry A. Wallace was a pragmatic American dreamer. He believed in the power of education and cooperation. He came from a long line of Henry Wallaces, 4 generations, and here they are. So this is Henry Wallace here. That's his father. His father would also be Secretary of Agriculture. And as we heard last night, wonderful lecturers here, Patrick Doyle, agriculture really, really was important to the economy. So you'll keep seeing just how important it was in America at the time. The grandfather is to the very right. He was asked to be Secretary of Agriculture. He declined. But he's going to be known as Uncle Henry, and he's just beloved by so many Americans and by the Irish. He came, as I briefly mentioned last night, it was Uncle Henry, I didn't call him Uncle Henry, who came to the Plunkett House and met A.E. And then his grandson would come. The father is a bit of a mystery. I wasn't finding him at the Plunkett House, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was. The baby, the sweet little baby, is going to end up passing away in Arizona, having done amazing work on genetics, on chickens, and then he does a lot with the plants that are in Arizona and would let students onto his acreage and study all the beautiful flora and fauna that they have, unusual in Arizona. So here are the Wallaces. And what's interesting about the Wallace family is they've been called the first family, America's first family of agriculture. And they really were just a force to be reckoned with. So there is a website called the Wallace Center of Iowa. And if you go to that, they give you much more detail about all of them. But one of the things they say is 4 generations of Henry Wallaces have profoundly influenced the development of American agriculture and agricultural policy. The impact of their activities has reached every corner of the world. So just as we're seeing with A.E., the ripple effect, the radiating that happens with him, the Wallaces are the same way. So let's just look at a little, let's go back to the Plunkett House since we were there last night, and that's just amazing. These photos I took last year when we had the unique opportunity to see those early issues of the Irish Homestead and then the Irish Statesman. For researchers, something very exciting within the last couple months, the British Library newspaper archive The membership's not that expensive. They've digitized all of the Irish homestead. So that's made research really helpful. It was hard for me to get to the National Library of Ireland. While I was working on this, I couldn't. So I could do it from home. But it's interesting what they were doing. To spread the word, they turned to print. Just as Blavatsky knew she needed her printing press, moved from London to Dublin, that's when Morgan Price is going to come and Violet North. And they knew the power of print. They knew they needed to disseminate information. The Wallace family is based in Iowa. Early, the grandfather was a minister, but he's gonna switch gears and get involved with agriculture, and he's gonna found the Wallace's Farmer. At the same time, it's 1895, at the very same year that the Irish homestead is going to be founded. It's amazing. And I just put down from the Wallace's Farmer, they're going to later name it an Iowa homestead, which I think is interesting because you had the Irish homestead. But at first it was just the Wallace's Farmer, and he had his sons helping him. So that's why that apostrophe is S apostrophe. It was confusing me at first, but the sons were helping him. But I'm going to read the subtitle for that one. A weekly journal, and this is coming out of Iowa, published to promote good farming, clear thinking, right living. So why don't we go to another slide? I'm just going to read to you some of the quotes that I thought were really relevant to today. So I purposely made the article where you can't read it, but in blue, I'll just read through some of that. So this is what we're going to do is go into chronology. 1913, then we're going to go to 1923, and then we're going to go to the 30s. It was a great pleasure. So this is coming out of Iowa. This is Henry A. Wallace. So this is not the grandfather. This is our man, A.E.'s friend. At this point, he says, it was a great pleasure to visit the headquarters of the IAOS at the Plunkett House in Dublin. Now, he's publishing this in 1913, but it's pretty clear he was there in 1912. First, I met Mr. G.W. Russell, editor of the Irish Homestead, the paper which spreads cooperative ideas all over Ireland. My grandfather, the editor of Wallace's Farmer, has long been a great admirer of Mr. Russell's writings and often has me read them as models. I love that. Mr. Russell has the curious idea that the object of this universe of ours is the greatest sum total of human happiness in the long run. I know. Let's go to 1923. Mr. Russell has always excited our admiration. While he gives attention to the technical aspects of production and marketing, he remembers also that material prosperity is only a means to an end. He keeps before his readers always the idea that a more prosperous Ireland means not only an Ireland richer in food and clothing and housing, but in nourishment for the spirit and intellect, the intellect. He sees cooperation as more than a way to bigger profits. He sees it as the expression of a new way of living. Next, please. So now this is 1930. AE will have been in America 4 times. We've heard that over the course of our summer school, but he was here 4 times. George W. Russell, otherwise known as AE, who has a world fame as a poet and economist, is coming to the United States to lecture this fall and winter. And he had a pretty grueling schedule. These lecture tours were hard work. And then he remembers, my grandfather met Russell in Ireland more than 20 years ago. and looked upon him as probably the finest editor then writing. When I visited grandfather, he would oftentimes have me read aloud some of Russell's editorials, partly because he enjoyed them greatly himself, and partly because he wanted me to get some idea of what good writing was really like. Smart grandpa. Somehow I gained the idea that he was really living in another world, but that he was very anxious to have that other world come true in this world. In other words, he was a practical mystic. Why don't we go to the next slide? This I pulled out just to show you. He's pictured here, and then I just put him up there, and I've got some quotes about that, but I think I'll just call attention to one quote. And this is A.E. talking. He declared that it took poets and men of imagination to create a rural civilization, and told how he had been selected as an organizer of cooperative creameries by Sir Horace Plunkett. Not in spite of the fact that he was a poet, but because he was. That's a really interesting distinction. So when we think about him traveling on the West on that bicycle in those very early days before he was editor, he's connecting with people. And wow, it was two ways. He was learning, they were learning. Everybody was growing. So I might just give you a little overview about serving as in the Department of Agriculture. If maybe in question and answer, I can go into more depth, but what's going to happen, the reason Henry A. Wallace is going to be editor quite young is that when his father accepts the position of taking on Department of Secretary or Secretary of Education, then he needs his son, Uncle Henry's grandson, to take over. So he's going to really do a lot of work with writing, reaching people. When I was going through the papers, the Wallace papers, I was just astounded by the letters from farmers, probably like my grandmother, who maybe didn't have more than an 8th grade education, but had beautiful handwriting. In America, we used to do the Palmer method, this beautiful flowing. But they're writing in and they're asking questions about milk, or what do I do with my corn? Or sometimes they're saying, we've seen that there's someone named A.E. We think we'd like him to come to our community. So there's a treasure trove out there. And I'm just giving you kind of the cream, but there's more cream. Okay. Now, Wallace is going to get involved at a really important time in America because we're suffering from the Great Depression. But actually, it's interesting. If you look at the soil in America, in the 20s, we're already having a depression on farms because farmers didn't have the kind of education they should have with crop rotation, different ways they could have preserved the soil, kept the topsoil rich. So there was already a Great Depression happening, but for sure by the 30s we had it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's going to come in, FDR, with this New Deal platform, and education is going to be central to it, and a coming together. And he needs someone like Henry Wallace to make things happen. Now, Henry Wallace, I need to place him in the cornfield for a minute before we go to the White House. He's going to grow up literally in the cornfields of Iowa. And he has a passion for an ear of corn. And he's going to make waves at the county fair. because they thought corn, you would give a prize, first prize, based on how the corn cob looked. And young Henry Wallace started counting all the kernels and started doing calculations, and he actually thought about planets and weather. He's doing all kinds of things, and he would end up eventually creating hybrid corn. And we eat it today. The cows eat it, we eat it. It's in America, it's called Pioneer. It's a hybrid. I don't know what Henry Wallace would think about some of the genetic modifying, and I won't name names, but there's some big companies out there doing some things that I don't know if you'd agree with that ear of corn. But he's interested, and this is helpful, he's making money. I don't think he was after money, but he just was that smart. He's making money. So he's also, I need to give you a little background. I'm going to give you little Henry Wallace. He's going to meet George Washington Carver, who's going to be really important, who was born a slave, who is going to go to university in Iowa where Henry A. Wallace's father is teaching. And he can't get a university dorm room. So the Wallace family invites him to live with their family. And little Henry Wallace gets to walk the cornfields, be out in nature, and learn from this great man. And one of the things he learns is the power of observation, to just commune with nature. And I think you're going to see that thread running throughout this when you hear some of his ideas about the soil. If you would, we'll go to the next slide. This is a letter from Henry Wallace to Dear A.E., and it's 1930. So A.E. is in New York City. I have been wondering whether you met James Morgan Price. Now, we know this is somebody we want to do more work on, but he's a mystery man. You reach out for him and he disappears, but he's there. And if his facilities were still strong enough so that you could have a thoroughly enjoyable visit. Now, I'm going to just stop there for a moment. If you've looked at their relationship, Price is A.E.'s teacher, and he's teaching him how to discipline, how to concentrate, and they were doing some kind of exercises with thought transfer. So they didn't need smartphones, text messaging. They just were sending each other messages and practicing that. And they'd also do visualization techniques where they would visualize an image and then the other person would draw it out. Price, I know we don't have a lot of time with him today, but I will say he is going to make waves, continues to make waves with his interpretation of the New Testament and reincarnation. He's a scholar, and he was directly connected to Blavatsky. Okay, it continues. You may be interested in knowing that some time ago, a Mr. McGuire of Minnesota was in our office. It seems that you had cast a spell over him, and he could not get out from under the influence. I thought you'd like that, my Minnesota friends. Your influence will linger on and in many unsuspected places and for a number of years. Love that last line. Okay, next letter. So this is A.E. He's writing, it's 1931. He's in Dublin. He's at his house. He's going to mention the secret doctrine, Blavatsky's important text that the household used to read and study and discuss. And I'm sure in his salons was a topic of discussion back and forth. He's also going to discuss soil and Mother Earth. Dear Henry, and this is an excerpt, I'm not giving you the whole letter. It was pleasant to hear from you again. I have the warmest memories of my visits to you. Yes, I'm working hard on my new book. I have intended it to be a second volume of The Candle of Vision, but it is developing in its own fashion. I hardly know how to describe it, whether as a study of incarnation and the ways in which the reincarnating psyche affects the body, or merely as some chapters on the explanation of it. Anyhow, it is getting on. It is interesting what you say about the mystical feeling about the American soil. That seems to me to be the real lack in American culture. It is not at present rooted in the earth. And then this is a great line. My earth, of course, is a living being. And then AE continues. Emerson, Whitman, and Thoreau had that deep feeling about a living nature. Now this is fun. For the longest time, I thought he was saying dirt feeling. I kind of wish he was saying dirt feeling, but I finally went back to the original letter and it's deep feeling. But some scholars have quoted it as dirt feeling. I don't know. We'll say dirt feeling and deep feeling. Your people are too restless. This is the Americans. Your people are too restless for reverie. But all great spiritual movements must have a life springing out of Mother Earth. So you're getting a taste here of how rich these letters are. And these letters I was finding, they're just a few in the Wallace collection. But because Arthur's here today, I think I'll tell you something you might not know. There's a letter from the son who will end up in America, and he's looking for work. He needs a job. And he writes to Henry Wallace, seeing if he can help him. But this is America. People were not getting jobs. It's the Depression. And Henry, I'm sorry to say, Henry's not able to help him. But he writes a really long letter and wishes him well. And they will write back and forth. So it's not just AE writing to Henry Wallace, it's the son. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Well, if we think about the influence of the Wallace family, of AE, but in particular AE and what they were doing, it seems like so much of those those publications, prolific publications, really helped human beings begin to form not just articles for a newspaper, but full-length books. So AE is going to end up with one of his most important books, The National Being. And I'm going to just stop here right now and point out, I know I haven't discussed many women. I mentioned Violet. So I want to take a little time and celebrate this woman. I know, Michael, you have written about her. She has been mentioned in articles. Mary Harriman Rumsey. She'll live from 1881 to 1934. This is another what if story. Had she not died, what would America look like? What might have happened? But she did die young. She was an American social activist. She was incredibly wealthy. Her father was a tycoon, made a ton of money with railroads. She could have just gone to parties and had worn nice dresses and had tea. But she looked around carefully and noticed there was a lot of suffering. So she's going to end up creating the Junior League. At the time, it was called the Junior League of Settlements. So think about this. She's thinking about immigrants. And how can we help immigrants? How can we welcome them? How can we educate them and give them a rich cultural life? She's also going to be the chair of the first U.S. consumer rights group. So for women, women's history, this is major. Here is a U.S. president appointing a woman to run this really important group. So she was a firm believer in the power of cooperation. And she knew and admired AE's the national being. So we heard about Gandhi and other places in the world. So this is taking us out east in America. This is very sad. If you look at the chronology, you might wonder if she's inviting AE over. It seems even funding it. AE is going to arrive only to find out his good friend has passed. So that must have been a real jolt for him. She died riding horses, actually, fox hunt. She was doing something quite aristocratic in Virginia. I'm going to read from an article that appeared in the New York Times in 1933. And this is really interesting. She is going to make it very clear that she owes a lot to AE, to our spiritual genius from Ireland. A new spirit has entered into government. New ideas have come into being, and the people are beginning to realize that government exists for their benefit and that it concerns itself with their well-being and that they can turn to it for assistance and help. I dreamed that there would be a time when there would be more cooperation, not only between people themselves, but also between the government and the people. My ideas, however, were more or less hazy. Then one day, I happened to run across the national being. I did not know much about AE at that time, but in that book, I found my nebulous ideas put into practical form. The Irish mystic carried me along with him. Here was a man who believed that it was not possible for a country to advance without cooperation, and who described how the best of community life could be built up through it. End of quote. So in the very right-hand side, I have just a note about President Roosevelt's administration inviting AE to advise the Department of Agriculture. At this time, Henry Wallace is Secretary of Agriculture. On the 5th of January, 1935, AE is going to dine with our president, our US president, and he's going to discuss the cooperative movement. On to our third part. And what a perfect setting for this. We're in the United Arts Club surrounded by beauty. One of AE's visions. He's a big reason we're here. Well, he is why we're here. So beauty in nature. AE knew that rural societies, yes, they needed to control the methods of production. They needed to cooperate, but they also needed richness, culture, art, beauty, not just the beauty of nature, but the beauty of art, what art can bring them. So this is an article he wrote, AE wrote in the Daily Express in 1898, and he talks about art in Ireland. And he's campaigning. Again, he's turning to print to educate. It's that vocational education. It's reaching everyone, saying, come together, let's join in. You need a cultural renaissance. He said, make art accessible to art students and to the public. Not all art students can visit London or Paris to see such works. So here's a direct quote in purple. A Celtic Renaissance in literature would be a very incomplete expression of the ideals of the new movement unless there was a corresponding awakening of Celtic art. So I'm excited with our discussion about looking at his art, getting to some of those pieces that are hiding in basements and vaults, and putting them out in public and talking about the importance of art and beauty as all part of this interwoven rich fabric. This lovely painting by Sargent is in London. It came to Dublin AE saw it. And of course, it's twilight. And those purples are coming in and the opalescence, but also the innocence of these children and that inner glow that's coming in as they're lighting the lanterns. So it's called Carnation, Lily, Lily Rose. And AE writes about this is the kind of art that we could be showing. And art students could learn from it. But it's not just about the art students, it's all of us. That we could have a conversation with this piece of art and maybe walk away smarter, enriched, and for sure we will be. Let's go to another slide. Remember the guru letters that I'm not going to talk about? There was a man named Nicholas Roerich, and he was a mystic painter. He was a spiritual seeker like Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace talked about this inner light that he was searching for. Roerich has this idea during the war, we have to save art, architecture, science. We have to save our cultural artifacts from being destroyed. So he takes a very ancient symbol of this triangle, the dots, and he creates a banner. And his vision is, we're going to put this banner up in places where things could be bombed to signal to those don't destroy it. Isn't that idealistic and wonderful? In the corner, you'll see Roerich saying, the awareness of beauty will save the world. Now, there is a Roerich Museum in New York. Apparently, there's one in Russia. I don't know if it's open for business these days, but there is one. And this is really interesting. Here's Henry Wallace. As Secretary of Agriculture, when you go through his letters, he's going back and forth campaigning. And he's talking to AE about it a little. Campaigning to get this banner of peace, to save art and culture. So there he is signing, and there's the President of the United States right there. So there's a letter I found where AE is saying 1931, he said, I did not see the Roerich Museum, but I heard of it, and I am sorry I did not find time to see it. So that was helpful. He knew about it. Roerich is also a theosophist. Okay. So we're back in the cornfields. This is Henry Wallace. He is, at this point, the vice president. He's going to do for the position of vice president when no other vice president has done. He really was active. You look at his letters, he's all over doing things to make the world a better place. He's cooperating with all kinds of people. He's campaigning. He's working on banners of peace, all kinds of things. But he had a victory garden near the White House. And he would go and grow his corn and other plants, and he'd be out there weeding. So I'm going to just show you on the top right. This appeared in Wallace's Farmer in 1915, and it's an article by our friend AE, and he's talking about agriculture being the most intellectual of occupations. This is one of the joys of this research, is because I grew up on a farm, and I think my parents sometimes wondered, should they have bought this farm and raised 4 children on a farm? They really took us off the grid, and I understand why they did. But my father is still alive, and I sent him this article, and I said, I finally get it. I finally get what you were up to, raising all of us on this farm. Okay, so here's a quote from the article, and this is AE writing. We ourselves have always dealt with agriculture as the most intellectual of all occupations. But what other occupations are there which invite so much thought, which by their nature bring man into contact with eternal realities? Here, in a field, is the seed. That field is electric with hidden energies, chemical forces, which play on the seed. What is in the seed? Who knows? A spirit, perhaps, and another kind of life differing from ours. Next slide. Jimmy, this is for you. So R.A. Anderson, we saw him yesterday. The portrait was near the table. He's written a wonderful book on the history of the Plunkett House. He's a big part of the cooperative movement, president of the Irish IAOC, or S. He says, and this is a direct quote, "I doubt he," and he's talking about AE, "has contributed anything more valuable, more eternally true than his articles in the Homestead, written in the fairyland of his editorial sanctum in the Plunkett House." So we're just going to conclude with a couple of quotes. This is Professor Summerfield. And Professor Doyle, maybe Summerfield was thinking of you. I'm going to read this out for you. AE accepted a position under Plunkett, fully concurring in his aims and ideals, and determined to work for human brotherhood through the cooperative movement without ever mentioning to the farmers the theosophical beliefs which were his inspiration. In this way, he was convinced he would help make Irishmen ready for the great destiny which awaited them. Next slide, please. AE, and this is me, AE and Henry Wallace were spiritual brothers. Although these myriad-minded men have been neglected in recent years, the state of the world today is such that there is value in remembering them. There is value in reconsidering their lives and what they have to teach us. There is value in rekindling within us their shared spirit of cooperation. Thank you very much. We have time, I think, for questions. I'm not sure what time it is. Or do we not? It's 2 o'clock.
I've got like a minute or two.
Minute or two? Anybody? Questions, comments? Yes.
The lady that you mentioned, was it Mary?
Harriman? Rumsey, yes.
Yes. Was she anything to Albert Harriman? Was they the same thing?
Yes, he was the governor of New York.
Yeah.
Yes, that was her brother.
Yeah. So
Yes.
when Wallace ran for president in 1948, what was the hatchet job they did on?
Are we recording? Okay. I can't help but think of what happened to Bernie Sanders. He was too progressive. He was too much a cooperative thinker. And he wasn't about money. He was about lifting people up. And it was a backdoor deal. I mean, he should have, everybody liked, most people liked him. And Jimmy knows this story. He was about to be nominated. And they suddenly shut the lights off and said, "Oh, we'll do this tomorrow." And tomorrow came, and tomorrow never came because he was done. So we can talk about this. At this time, the guru letters are, some people know about them. And I don't know if Roosevelt knew. And it shouldn't have been enough to bring him down. But mysticism in America, I'm not sure. I mean, we do have a history of it, but that out in the open, I don't know.
Bear in mind, in the 1960 presidential election, it was an issue that John Kennedy was Catholic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So mysticism is a step a lot further than being Catholic.
Correct. And what's interesting is Wallace, because he's a scientist, really, he knows, well, not because he's a scientist, but he's involved in the Manhattan Project. He knows about it. And it's good he knows about it because he's a scientist. But he's also a theosophist who's saying, I'm thinking Cillian Murphy right now and Oppenheimer, and what happens to Oppenheimer. Wallace is saying, no, we have the responsibility to share what we know. We're going to share with the Russians. We're going to cooperate. Well, that's not going to happen if you're all about wanting to start a Cold War.
Well, he's very close to the Russians.
Yes. There are complications with Nicholas' work. He was doing some things that were not always, he might have been a white Russian, and it's like a novel, spy novel.
Was the essential point though that everybody knew that Roosevelt would be through a third-term health life?
Correct.
So that whoever was vice president would be president.
Correct. And this is the world that could have been. This is the theosophist president that never was. And what would our world look like? I think about that daily, minute by minute.
Both of them. both people with Mary died. I think Mary would have been a candidate for president at some stage.
Yes.
You know, to maybe the first American president.
Well, he was incredibly charismatic. I mean, he's down to earth, and that's why Roosevelt picked him for agriculture secretary, because he was of the people, but he was also very smart.
It seems to be a point in the history of America where everything went wrong. You know, just when people disappeared, if they went on that trajectory, I imagine it would have been very liberal, probably more prosperous country.
And this is why what we're doing is so important, because it's a reminder of human beings who were on this earth, who had a vision for a world that worked for all.
Yeah, and Wallace did a lot of work with the indigenous people as well.
He did. Oh, yes. In Taylor's Falls, Minnesota, another Minnesota connection, he actually bought a plot of land, was working with a kind of a mystic. They were talking about planetary growing. What are the planets doing? But they were growing corn and experimenting with corn, and they were using indigenous methods that this man had learned. So that's an area that definitely needs more research. There's so many facets. I hope I've planted some seeds.
It was excellent.
Thank you. Mary.
Just curious, was Wallace trained as an agronomist, or is that how he developed the pioneer seed?
He did. He was trained and just really motivated. And he will end up, it's very sad, he's going to end up with ALS. He will have a farm in New York, and he's growing corn and gladiola and all kinds of wonderful things, but he's going to get ALS, and he's such a scientist. He keeps a detailed log of what's happening to his body, and he says, I want this to go to science so they can use it to help future scientists who might try to solve this.
His granddaughter,
yes,
was also, they had a business in Arizona. Plants that were resistant to drought. Like that.
Yes. Well, that's interesting. I am really curious if any of the Russells have corresponded with the Wallaces, because little baby Wallace ends up in Arizona doing all kinds of work.
They had a big business.
And he also was doing genetic. He's working with chickens, so and other things.
Joyce explored a lot about soil as well.
Yes.
So he was maybe investigating all this, what these two were up to as well.
Yes. So I hope as the day goes on, or tomorrow, if you have other questions, please come and talk to me. Thank you very much.